All right, good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me all right?
Good. Okay, so this is today's MPO meeting on Tuesday, November 10th. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Mordinger first of all now to go ahead and read a brief summary of the meeting's rules.
Jessica Mortinger, Transportation
Planning Manager. Good afternoon. Myself and Ashley Meyer, Transportation Planner, are on video today, and we'll work alongside Erin Quisenberry, the Chair of TAC, to facilitate the meeting proceedings. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast live on the city's YouTube channel and public access cable channel 25. During the meeting, when you are not participating, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found on the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. Muting your microphone during the meeting will make it easier for everyone to hear. You'll have to just remember to unmute when and if you want to speak. In some cases, we may mute or unmute people as needed to minimize distractions during the meeting. Please remember to state your name and title for the benefit of those listening remotely. You can turn on and off your video by clicking on the video icon on the menu. For the purpose of this public meeting, please keep your video on when you are participating in the meeting. When you are not participating, it is okay to turn your video off. Just remember, if you turn your video back on when you are participating. If you are participating by phone, you can click *6 to mute or unmute your phone. For those using Zoom, somewhere on your screen you will see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speaker. Gallery view tiles all the meeting participants. And now we'll return the meeting back over to TAC Chair Erin Quisenberry to do roll call.
That was fast. And efficient too, by the way. So again, this is
Erin Quisenberry, Chair for the MPO TAC meeting. I will call on each one of you individually just as I see you in my screen for introductions. Ashley?
I'm Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner.
Jessica?
Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager.
Ed?
Ed Corton, Community Development Director, Baldwin City.
Jeff?
Jeff Crick, Lawrence Douglas County Planning and Development Services, and part of the MPO.
Adam?
Adam Weigel, Transit and Parking Manager for the City of Lawrence.
Melinda?
Melinda Harger, Assistant Director of Municipal Services and Operations for the City of Lawrence.
Allison?
Allison Smith, KDOT Planning.
Laura?
Laura McCulloch, Community Health Planner with Lawrence Douglas County Public Health.
Kurt?
So all of the Kurt's is Kurt Henning, who's the video guy for the city.
Okay. Matt?
Hey, Matt Messina, Transportation Planning at KDOT.
And Jeffrey?
Management Analyst, City of Eudora.
Are there anybody else? Is there anybody else that maybe sharing a screen or something like that that needs an introduction? All right, seeing none, we're going to move to item B of the agenda, which is public comment. Do we have any public comment for today's meeting?
Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. No one has indicated in person or via any remote
communication tool that they will be participating to provide public comment today at the meeting.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, item number C will be the approval of the minutes from October 6, 2020. Does anybody not have a copy of the minutes that they may need a few minutes to review real quick? Does everybody have
access to the agenda where you could pull the minutes up? And if everybody does have access to that, we'll be looking for a motion to approve the October 6, 2020 minutes.
This is Melinda Harger with City of Lawrence, and I move to approve the minutes for the October 6th meeting.
This is Ed Corton, Community Development Director. I'll second that.
Okay, this is Erin Quisenberry, Chair for TAC. It's been motioned by Melinda and seconded by Ed to approve the October 6, 2020 minutes. We'll move into a roll call to approve the minutes.
Well, that's me. So Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner. Quiz?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Allison?
Aye.
Jeffrey in place for Eudora. I think he said yes. Ed,
Aye.
Jeff Crick,
Aye.
and Melinda.
Aye.
All right. 7 passes 7-0.
Okay, October 6, 2020 minutes are approved. Moving on to regular agenda items, letter D, first bullet point will be item number 1, 2021 Unified Planning Work Program, UPWP. The UPWP describes the work the MPO will be doing in 2021. The public comment period was September 30th through October 30th. Public comments received and staff responses are linked. Will this be you, Ashley?
Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager.
We brought to you previously the conversation about our Unified Planning Work Program for 2021 and put that out for public comment. In a second, I'll talk about that, but I just want to refresh your memory about some of our major planning activities for 2021. We're looking at participating in the consultant-led effort for the Lawrence Transit Route redesign, approval of the updated of the countywide bikeway portion of the bikeway plan, looking at best practices and for a framework between land use and transportation that could result in some other work we identify at a future time. Looking at updating the regional pedestrian plan and the ITS regional architecture, in addition to participating in the development with the City of Lawrence and the ADA transition plan and the multimodal traffic impact study requirements. On top of that, we have then all of our regular UPWP, billing, TIP, and performance reporting work that you would expect to see. I'm not going to go into much more detail, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. To focus and just highlight a little bit, we received public comment from one community member addressing a multitude of things, primarily requesting consideration. A majority of the comments were around engaging in aviation planning. And while CFR, the federal regulations, does provide airport operations as one of the many topical areas that the MPO can coordinate with, in conversations with Amanda Saheen, the project engineer that oversees the Aviation Advisory Board for the Lawrence General Aviation Airport, we don't believe that there's a level of regional significance to require regional coordination with surface transportation and or for the MPO to really get involved at that time. Part of that is also contingent on the fact that the MPO has a staff of 2. So there's not necessarily additional capacity in our existing workload, and it would be a trade-off. And at this point in time, we don't feel like it's something that we would want to entertain based on our guiding documents that establish the MPO in the region. That's something we could evaluate at a future point in time, and we would entertain with conversation with any of you today. Many of the other comments were just out of scope, either of the MPO program or we hopefully in our answer clarified why we have chosen to word our UPWP the way we have. So I'd be happy to go through those or answer any other in more detail if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, we're looking for a recommendation for approval today to send this to the MPO Policy Board.
This is Quiz, Chair of TAC, and Jessica, real quick, maybe Ashley could pull up the list of items again that were considered as part of the whole planning program.
That major activities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my question for Jessica would be, any of those bullet points that still seem like they needed any consideration, a little more time, or you feel pretty good where you're at with all of them?
I feel like this is Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. We really feel like at this point in time, based on where we could project to be, these are the next work tasks that need to be prioritized. Of course, we can entertain in the future if something comes up and isn't included in the scope of work that we need to amend. We typically do a mid-year amendment, but based on the capacity we believe we'll have with staff and our budget, this is what we feel like is realistic for 2021.
This is Allison Smith with KDOT. The public comment just to help inform that, I think way long ago, the MPO included airport projects in the TIP and did a little bit of coordination with the airport. And I'm talking like, I've been here 13 years, so early on. So that might be perhaps this member of the public's been involved or looked at MPO stuff for a while. Maybe they remember that. So not to say we need to do it now because things are much different, but that might kind of be the case.
Jessica Martinger, Transportation Planning Manager. Allison, we'd have to agree. I think, because of the strong FFA involvement in much or all of the airport's regulations, we really feel like it's a duplicate, because there's not like multimodal issues that need to be coordinated. There's not a lot of passenger trip making where people would need to rely on surface transportation to kind of make connections in terms of like commuter service or other things that probably more closely tie into other regionally significant issues. We really felt like it's really overdoing the bureaucracy to kind of require some of that process when they already have a very extensive federal process.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just giving a little bit of background as to what happened kind of in the past. So.
This is Quiz, Chair of TAC. Is there anybody else that has any other comments regarding the 2021 Unified Planning Work Program, comments or questions for Jessica? If there's not, we'll be looking for a motion to approve.
This is Adam Weigel, TAC member. I'll move approval of the 2021 Unified Planning Work Program.
Allison Smith, KDOT, I'll second.
All right, this is Quiz, Chair of TAC. It's been moved by Adam and seconded by Allison to go ahead and approve the 2021 Unified Planning Work Program. All those in favor, we'll be doing a roll call vote, and that'll be going to Ashley.
Thank you. Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner. Quiz?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Allison?
Aye.
Jeffrey?
Aye.
Chad?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And Melinda?
Aye.
8. That passes 8-0.
All right, agenda item letter D, number 2. We'll move to safe routes to school plans for Lawrence, Eudora, and Baldwin City. Jessica?
Ashley.
I'm going to flip a coin on the next one then. So Ashley, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner, and I'm going to share my screen. All right. So again, we're here to talk about the Safe Routes to School plans for Lawrence, Eudora, and Baldwin City. And I'm going to present these as one presentation, but when we get to the voting, we'll actually do 3 separate votes, one for each of the plans. All right. The Safe Routes to School plans were created for all 3 cities, Lawrence, Eudora, and Baldwin City, and they were all developed for different reasons. Lawrence had started doing Safe Routes to School planning in 2014. So this planning process was a continuation of that implementation and to create a formal citywide plan. The Eudora and Baldwin City ones were the first time that Safe Routes to School planning occurred in those locations, creating this plan like this at least. And the organizations that worked on developing this was the MPO, the Public Health Department, and the Sustainability Office for all 3. And then within the individual cities, the city and the school district helped on the specific plans. And these plans, I guess, were created to go through the whole Safe Routes to School framework, and then also to be able to have more weight when applying for Safe Routes to School funding through the Transportation Alternatives Program through KDOT. The City of Lawrence has received funding in the past based on previous Safe Routes to School planning work and the fact the routes were incorporated in the pedestrian plan, but by having this plan, the Safe Routes to School plan, the application should have greater weight in the future. The planning process was a 15-month process that included robust public input and had a little bit different situation based on what city. So in the spring and summer of 2019, a parent survey was done in Lawrence, where that was done in the fall of 2019 in Baldwin and Eudora. And the parent survey there included some draft routes. And this plan was going through the whole process, and then COVID-19 happened. So we paused the process and then realized that we needed to keep moving forward while recognizing that students aren't back full-time in person in all locations, and that there will be some delay specifically on implementing the school recommendations. But staff didn't want to lose the progress that has been made and continue to work on implementing the plan because it takes a long time to do it. The plan includes the Safe Routes to School framework, which has the typical E's that you think of for bicycle and pedestrian planning. Now, there was the national conversation in the spring around systemic racism occurred, and so the National Safe Routes to School Partnership decided to remove enforcement as a required portion of the plan. Instead, they replaced it with encouragement. And enforcement may still be needed, but it's just not a required element anymore. When we look through all the parent public input we received, there was a lot of comments about enforcement. And so as a result, it's been left in the plan, but it's not a fundamental piece anymore. It's just something that people want to have happen. So we'll have to talk with using the engagement thing to figure out what would be the best way to do that as the plan is implemented. Data was gathered through a biannual student travel tally, which has happened in the Lawrence School District for the elementary and middle schools since the fall of 2014 and occurred for the first time in Baldwin City and Eudora in the spring of 2019. Those counts did not occur in 2020 due to COVID-19, but you can see the national average is about 13% of K through 8 students walking and biking, and the Lawrence numbers are higher than that, and the Baldwin City Middle School is also higher. In Lawrence, staff and some volunteers did a comprehensive evaluation of school crossing guards in the 23 existing locations and 5 potential new ones. Now, some of the locations did not meet the warrants based on the number of children crossing or gaps in traffic, and some new ones do meet the warrants. So this is something that the Lawrence City Commission will have to have a conversation about due to the budget impacts of this evaluation. This graphic shows the number of responses received in the parent survey for each of the cities and the top barriers. So the top 3 barriers for Lawrence, there's actually 4 there, but the third one is weather and climate, and we can't do anything about that anyway. So we looked at the top 4, so speed, an amount of traffic, and then safety of intersections and crossings. And those 3 things are all things that the City of Lawrence is already working on, and the plan proposes solutions to address. And those are very similar to the ones that were included as responses in Eudora and Baldwin City: distance, speed, safety. In Lawrence, a Safe Routes to School existing conditions memo was written because, as I mentioned, the process started in Lawrence in 2014, but nothing was ever written down. And so we needed to document what had occurred since the beginning of Safe Routes to School planning work to now. And so we did that. One of the recommendations of the planning process is to do an annual update to see sidewalk progress, because it was a bit hard to do this documentation process because it involved looking at aerials and trying to figure out what was new and what wasn't. Part of the planning process was evaluating routes. In Lawrence specifically, since we already had routes, looking at the existing routes and then looking at the anonymized student data that was provided in all 3 cities and mapping it so there was a heat map. And so the Billy Mills map on the right shows on Iowa down south that there was a pocket of density right there. And so the blue line is the proposed new route. And so staff connected the proposed new, or the pocket of density to the route, which it wasn't previously connected. Also looked at walk sheds because it's hard to know, well, how far would kids actually have to walk? These are maps for Eudora and Baldwin City. And the basis for these routes came from the pedestrian plan, but then worked with staff at the cities as well as through public input to revise them. This slide talks about public input on specific elements. So in Lawrence, there was an open house and it had low attendance. And so staff talked to each of the middle and elementary schools, public schools, to see what would make the most sense for staff to visit. So we visited site councils, PTAs or PTOs, and asked a bunch of questions about very specific things. And in Eudora and Baldwin City, staff tabled at parent-teacher conferences in October of 2019 and asked about proposed routes, overarching strategies, and did the parent survey as well. This is an example of one of the questions in Lawrence talking about having sidewalk on both sides of the street or only one side of the street. The goal prior to doing this plan was to have sidewalk on both sides of the street. But as staff looked at the financial need and recognizing that there's sidewalk gaps, and looking at the results of this, staff decided to go forward with the goal of having sidewalk on both sides of the street for safe routes to school routes that are arterials or collectors, and only one side of the street if it's a local street. Because if you look at the 80% on both sides for collector safe routes to school, and then the local safe routes to school on both sides, it's 53%. So it really dropped. It was a drastic drop off of what people wanted. Here's just an example of a route alternative. In Lawrence, we had 7 schools with alternatives when staff was looking at the different routes, thinking about, well, what makes the most sense, and realized that either one of those would work. And so one of the questions in the feedback packet was asking, what do you think? And got these results back and then adjusted the routes based on that. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jessica.
Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. So we really broke up the action plan into
some categories that were focused around the issues that we heard from parents throughout this process. And so we'll kind of highlight, I'll go at a high level to highlight kind of some of those. And in the plan, there's some specific action chart that really attempts to narrow down who's responsible for some of that work. So the first one we talked about is traffic control. We heard a lot from parents about driver behavior, user behavior, and so we really felt like the neighborhood traffic management program, in addition to the draft school area traffic control policy that's still in draft form, are 2 things that need to happen, and in coordination will really help facilitate traffic control and the work around that, particularly in Lawrence. For each of the schools, we realized that there was inconsistent information being distributed around traffic circulation. So where's the bus pullout? Where are parent drop off? Where is staff parking? And so for a lot of new parents, sometimes you had to interpret this big text block to try to figure out if you could figure out what you were supposed to do in terms of navigating the site, no matter how you were getting there. And as we looked at the framework for the plan, we really felt like a circulation map to document existing circulation and standardize those across all schools would be really beneficial, in addition to the infrastructure route maps that are in the plan that draft all those proposed routes, where we're looking at identifying projects. And we'll look a little more at the system-wide map in a minute. and the specific projects in some cases. And then that third kind of component really is around the other map is around encouragement, and that would be the pedestrian or bike specific map that we had done previously as part of the, probably in 2015, that really needs an update, and that process kind of frames out the 3 maps that we kind of talk about in the plan in terms of recommendations. We also talk about enforcing traffic laws and the benefits and consideration of lowering speed limits on local streets, which is something the city of Lawrence just voted to do, 25 on all residential streets. So particularly for the neighborhood schools in Lawrence, that will be of great benefit to safe routes to school implementation. Crossings are a huge issue, I think, in all of the cities we worked in, some more specific than others where there were highways intersecting the community where kids were expected to bike and walk. And the plan specifically calls for more comfortable crossings in those places. But we also recognize that there is a need to develop a pedestrian crossing evaluation in Lawrence because there are a lot of high volume arterial and some collector streets where children are going to need to cross if they want to use the routes as they've been established and or to get to the routes from their house. And so there's some additional work needed to be done around pedestrian crossing evaluation, which is some work that the Multimodal Transportation Commission has on their calendar, and we felt it would be very good in coordination for implementing safe routes. And then the communities that have crossing guard programs, we say to continue them in Eudora and Baldwin City. And then in Lawrence, we believe there needs to be some additional evaluation done around the crossing guard program in the sense that there needs to be a more regularly rotating evaluation of crossing guards to ensure they meet the warrants or not. And then the crossing guards really should be placed along established routes where we're intending to funnel children in, and that should kind of be done on an evaluation timeline and process that's consistent with the city budget. And we recognize that there needs to be some more work done on that. This one is probably the most common one when people get to safe routes to school planning. They always want to talk about building gaps and building infrastructure. And so you'll find some of this in the plan. I'm not going to go over this in too much detail, but it's about prioritizing investments where they're most logically to make impacts for biking and walking networks. We set goals for all of the communities about what percentage of sidewalks they should complete on one side or both sides, depending on, for Lawrence with collector and arterial on both sides, but everywhere else, at least one side of all safe routes. It's really exciting also to note that Baldwin City has made really, really great progress, and will probably be pursuing some of the funding to get and hopefully be able to look at that 100% continuous sidewalk along one side of safe routes. We were really excited to see that when we realized that could actually be a realistic possibility in setting that goal, just because of the continued efforts that are happening. We realize that particularly in Lawrence, because there are so many schools involved, that there really is a need to formalize a working group in terms of a MOU. Something had been drafted in probably 2016, and we picked that back up, and we believe that in correlation with the school area traffic control policy is going to be really important, particularly in Lawrence, to help unify and facilitate future coordination work around safe routes. We believe in all the communities developing the walking and biking culture comes down to more events, education and club incentivized programs, and education. And so something I'd highlight here is, and Laura can talk about it a little more in the discussion, is we are already beginning the phase public health to work with USD 497 to develop some pedestrian safety education in a more robust curriculum that can be taught kind of in an interdisciplinary way. So maybe it belongs in math or science or art or writing in a way to expand it beyond just some basic look before crossing, in a way to get kids more engaged around the built environment and walking. So that's really exciting. There's a lot of activities that can happen around this. So some of this in terms of responsibility falls, you can see our simple walking and biking maps. That'll be something that the working group would be a part of. The website, which is really a responsibility of public health. The USD 497, which has their bike education and safety training. That's something we recommend expanding in some of the other communities. And so you can see it's a variety of programs that are probably some more appropriate than others at schools, at the school site specific level versus at the district level, and some of these will take implementation and some of those will rely on other best practices that we talk about at some point in the plan about identifying school champions, and that's some work that's going to be ongoing. You'll see here. We realize, as Ashley mentioned earlier, that constant engagement with the program really about tracking progress in terms of student travel tallies, but also inventories of bicycle and pedestrian networks and parent surveys are something we call for in the plan to get on a cycle to kind of begin that rotation. We learned, for example, with this last round of parent surveys that we need to do those in paper. When those were done in 2015, we got over 1,000 surveys, and this last time it was like 200. So we know when kids have homework to take home to their parents, we are more likely to get it back than an online link. So this process also led us to other processes, which results in how we can fine-tune this program moving forward. So we kind of envision this as being on a rotation in our MPO cycle, that it looks like probably every 5 years in the midst of pedestrian planning and bikeway planning before we would do a long-range plan, and we're going to kind of set that expectation. There could be, and we believe there should be, the process warranted if school boundaries change or there's another significant land use change that would impact student density or walking and biking to school, that we could evaluate routes based on that, and that process probably hopefully would be established through that coordinated working group and the school area traffic control policy. So we set SMART goals for all of the plans. We're looking at basically a lot of outcome in terms of biking and walking rates and what we felt was realistic based on the number of students who live in each kind of band of walking radius from their schools. It's not realistic probably ever to get to 100%. In terms of it's unreasonable to expect some young children to walk maybe that far, but also looking at network completeness and some goals around what that means. And so we set that for each of the communities, and you can see. Again, I'll mention that both in Eudora and in Baldwin City, we noted specifically the crossings as critical connections because of the nature of the volume and speed for children having to cross as critical safety components of the success of the outcomes of what we would see for safe routes. Here's a map of the entire Lawrence Safe Route network. And then I will look at the Eudora and Baldwin City ones, which also have a lot more information because they have existing and missing sidewalk on. In the Eudora one, you can kind of see what components are missing. You can see kind of the primary ones and some alternative routes based on some conversations we've had and political feasibility being discussed with KDOT about a crossing over K10. And in Baldwin City, you can see likewise kind of the components they have missing. Also the large section kind of pending installation sidewalks that we started with in terms of what we had shown as missing and kind of show as pending that Ed's been working on, which is really exciting with his commission. In Lawrence, that kind of, in Lawrence, because it's really cluttered if I try to show you that all on one map, but here's the missing and existing, and here's the projects basically that would need to be completed to achieve some of those gap goals. That's the sidewalk pedestrian projects, and then there's some specific bikeway projects where there was correlation between the routes and the level of comfort on the bikeway map, where there was identified projects that could be improved that could benefit the work done in both. We had a final public comment period to allow people to kind of have a final comment on our draft plan, and we received some comments. In general, we felt like there was reasonable support for the work that we've done. We felt like some people were undecided, and some of the comments we still received feedback on, maybe that some of the people said no, were things we had either hopefully had tried to address in the plan or the plan makes note of, calling for future work on, particularly in regard to some specific crossings. We have posted all of those comments and responses in the MPO changes. There was a few, particularly we had a community editor, which is always helpful to us. By the time we've read it multiple times, that helped us identify some other things that we needed to just fix and clean up in the plan. But that's where we kind of feel like we're at on that. We have, after the public comment period on November 2nd, we took it to the city's Multimodal Transportation Commission. They had a robust discussion about the Safe Routes to School planning process. The biggest discussion they had before unanimously approving it was in regards to busing with Lawrence schools. And so they kind of thought we should have done more in regards to busing. The district, however, only buses kids who live outside of that 2.5 mile boundary because that's what they get reimbursed for. It's really a fiscal decision. We didn't think it was really fiscally feasible or prudent to explore kind of in more detail that program option. I think it could be continued conversation with a working group in the future. They were also very interested in the possibility of exploring the Lawrence Transit route redesign work and incidental, basically student trip making to school on a city public transit. So those are kind of the big issues that they had when they were discussing the plan. We're here today at the November 10th one. We then will proceed through our list to visit all of the school boards and city council, city commissions. So I'm happy to entertain any conversation or questions. We tried to give you a little bit of detail and insight to the plan, but again, these are hundreds of pages of documentation and years of work at this point. So we'll leave it there, and I'll let you ask any questions or have any discussion you might want to have about the plans.
This is Quiz, Chair of TAC. Question for Jessica. So the presentation we just saw really incorporates all three plans, just like an overview. Is that correct?
Yes. So we tried to call out, Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager, we tried to call out specifically where there were specific elements that were to each plan. But it really does, much of the analysis and process and work we did, we replicated in each community. So obviously it varied in some places where things existed or didn't exist in other places. And we tried to be really responsive locally to what would be perceived politically and also be reasonable for implementation in terms of something that was really realistic to begin starting the process. Each community is kind of in a different place in regards to Safe Route and the work they're doing around Safe Routes to School.
Thank you. Well, this is Quiz, Chair of TAC. Does anybody have any questions for Jessica or Ashley on this? This is awesome, by the way. This is a lot of work, for sure.
This is Melinda Harger, City of Lawrence. I had a question about how the secondary priority routes were identified. Like what specifically, just for simplicity, I guess, looking at the Eudora plan and how the secondary routes, there were a couple of those identified. I was just curious about what caused those to be the secondary versus the primary, what data goes into that. And if it helps, I'm on the plan page 30 of the PDF.
Oops. Okay. Can you see my screen now with the PowerPoint? Mm-hmm. Okay. Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner. So Melinda's talking about this blue and the purple over here on the Eudora map. And it really had to do with looking at what those roads connect to and what the sidewalks would connect, because knowing that all of that missing sidewalk is a lot of missing sidewalk. And so trying to prioritize all of it just seemed like too much. And so talking with staff at the city, we discussed splitting it up into phases and or priorities. So that way, if we got the purple done first, then that would connect more students to the schools immediately. And then we could add on the blue.
Okay, so there was input from the cities on which one would be the priority, if we were to phase it and get certain ones in first. I was just curious, the one down, let's see, 12th Street that connects the west school from the rest of the safe routes, routes. I just wasn't sure if that would be a priority, just because otherwise it's like an island out there of safe routes. So
yeah, the West Resource Center is where the Board of Education offices are, and then where a preschool is. So it's not necessarily people who would be walking. So it's important, but when looking at all of it as a whole, that's why that decision was made.
Less walkers going that direction.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, and that conversation also occurred in Baldwin City with Ed as well.
This is Quiz, Chair of TAC. Does anybody else have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I just figured I'd kind of chime in and fill in some of the information that Jessica had mentioned regarding the curriculum for the schools. So that project is one where we're hoping to really have an integrated curriculum, starting with Lawrence schools, and then hopefully having that be adopted for Baldwin City and Eudora eventually. We currently have a work group that has a primary teacher, primary physical education teacher with Lawrence schools, and a volunteer community member who has transportation, transit kind of background and interest, but she also has experience developing curriculum. So she's helping with that. We have a parent that will be an advisor for the committee, and we're currently looking for a secondary teacher to join the committee as well. So we're hoping that, with the representation from within the schools, that will be more readily adopted among the schools.
Okay, I think this is everyone's last chance. This is Quiz, Chair of TAC. So Jessica and Ashley, looking at the agenda, there's obviously three different links, and it looks like the action is to recommend them all separately. Seeing that there's no further comments or questions, I'm looking for a motion to approve the Lawrence Safe Routes to School Plan.
This is Allison with KDOT. I move to approve the Lawrence plan.
Adam Weigel, I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Allison and seconded by Adam to approve the Lawrence Safe Routes to School Plan. Go ahead and turn it over to Ashley for roll call vote.
Thank you. Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner. Quiz?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Allison?
Aye.
Jeffrey?
Aye.
Chad?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And Melinda.
Hey.
So that's 8-0 passes.
Okay, we'll move into the next portion of that, and looking for a motion to approve the Eudora Safe Routes to School Plan.
I'll take that one. Jeff Rhodes, City of Eudora. I move that the committee approve the Eudora Safe Routes to School Plan.
Melinda Harger, City of Lawrence. I second.
Okay, it's been motioned by Jeff and seconded by Melinda to approve the Eudora Safe Routes to School Plan. Turn it over to a roll call vote for Ashley.
Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner. Quiz,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Allison,
Aye.
Jeffrey,
Aye.
Chad,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
Jeff,
Aye.
Melinda.
Aye.
That passes 8-0.
Okay, last portion of this is to recommend approval of the Baldwin City Safe Routes to School Plan. Looking for a motion for approval.
Ed Corton, Community Development Director. I'll make a motion to approve the Baldwin City Safe Route to Schools Plan.
Jeff Crick, Planning and Development Services. I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Ed and seconded by Jeff Crick, two Jeffs on here, to approve the Baldwin City Safe Routes to School Plan. Looking for a roll call vote with Ashley.
Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner. Quiz,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Allison, Allison, looks like you're saying yes. But, okay. There we go. All right. Thank you. Jeffrey?
Aye.
Okay. Chad?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And Melinda?
Aye.
Right. That passes 8-0 as well. Thank you.
All right, that's awesome. Moving to item number 3 on the agenda, which is the 2021 safety target setting. I'm just going to say Ashley or Jessica, who's taking this? Ashley, go ahead.
Thank you. Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner. Let me share my screen again. Okay. Oops. There we go. All right. So Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner. The 2021 safety targets were discussed at the last meeting, and we ended up confirming that we wanted to put them out for public comment. And so they were out for public comment for 15 days. No public comments were received, and so we did not need to address them. We're talking about them today at this TAC meeting and then at the November 19th MPO Policy Board meeting. I'm going to just go through these kind of quickly because we already discussed all of them, but I will show you the new information that I compiled based on our meeting. So this is just the 2019 fatal crashes mapped. There were 12 fatalities and 10 crashes, okay, and 27 serious injuries and 25 crashes. Here's a serious injuries mapped, and the orange dot shows where there were 2 injuries rather than just 1. This is the fatal crashes by road ownership for 2019. This table is the new table that I developed after our meeting last month. So I went back from 2015 to 2019 to look at the entity that owns or maintains where the crash occurred. And so this shows a different picture than what we had before, which was just by jurisdiction. So before we might have said Douglas County when it really was the Eudora Township. So this is just a new way of looking at the data. And some of the data that we receive from KDOT does not have latitude and longitude information on it, and so we cannot map it. So that's why down at the bottom, the number of mapped crashes don't always match the number of actual fatalities. And then this is serious injuries by the road ownership. And then again, looking from 2015 to 2019. And there was a private road where one of the crashes occurred on in 2016, but that was in Lawrence. So that's why I denoted that. The serious injuries, there were more that were not mappable. And you can see on 2017 and 2018, there were quite a few. And so going forward in the future, since we plan to do it this way, we'll be able to make sure we have that data and kind of dig into it so we can map it going forward. Here's the map of the types of serious injury crashes: running into a fixed object, another vehicle, or a pedestrian or bicycle rider. And then this is the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries by road ownership through 2015 to 2019. And this one, 2017, had 7 mapped crashes and 10 that actually occurred. So this element is picking the target for 2021, the 5-year average target for each of our performance measures. And as we talked about last month, how this was developed was looking at the annual number and then doing a 5-year average and then projecting out 2020 or 2020, because the last number we actually have is 2019, and then projecting again to get 2021. So the projected number of fatalities for the 5-year average in 2021 is 10.9. The rate of fatalities per 100 million VMT is 0.88. And the reason why that number is going up is because in 2018, there were 6 fatalities, but in 2019, there were 12. So then our average, rolling average, went up. Number of serious injuries also went up compared to 2018 and 2019. And so the 2021 5-year average target is 27.3. And the rate of serious injuries is 2.5. While the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries went down by 1. And so the projected 5-year average is 4.7. So those are the safety targets that we are looking for your recommendation of approval, so they could be set as our targets in the TIP and in T2040. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So this is Quiz, Chair of TAC. Question for Ashley. I was not at the October meeting, so I'm just curious to know in the conversation, was there any conversation about, seasonal crashes, like, more in the wintertime or more in the nighttime as compared to daytime? Would you guys discuss any of that or have that data available?
Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner, we did not discuss that specific information. We do have that information. The KDOT information includes daylight and like road surface condition and if it was raining and all that sort of thing. It would require digging into it more to really look at it. And some of it, when there's hot spots, where there's areas where there are lots of crashes that occurred, we can realize that something's going on there and that road intersection or whatever needs to be improved. But sometimes it's just kind of random, it seems like. And so trying to completely do a year-to-year evaluation is hard, which is why we looked at the 5-year set of data, looking at the locations.
Gotcha. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Ashley?
This is Adam Weigel, TAC member. I'll just put this out there and let you indulge me for a minute. So I guess it's kind of interesting to see a projected increase in safety target. And I understand mathematically why it's that way, like we are using that and projecting out. Is when we set these targets, is it us trying to gauge, mathematically what it is likely to be, or is there some intent that we're trying to drive down the numbers? Maybe just speak to that.
Sure. Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner. I'll say a little bit and then Jessica probably will say something. This kind of a philosophical, I can't say the word, philosophical. Nope.
It's not philosophical.
Philosophical, there we go, thing that we kind of discuss every year, because we don't actually program funding for projects, it's not like the MPO can actually control this. And so it's kind of a hard place that we're in because we need to set these targets, but yet we don't have actual control over it. Jessica, Jeff?
Yeah, Jessica Morton, your Transportation Planning Manager. I think it's important to entertain these conversations, Adam, and don't worry, Quiz was the last one to let us have this conversation last year, and we have it all the time because I think the conversation goes back to why don't you set your goal to 0? You know, if we really want to talk about being progressive and keeping people safe and a focus on safety, why is that not your goal? And regionally, the conversation we've had is to look at the data trends. It's not realistic. A 5-year rolling average target could never be 0. Even if we got 0 crashes next year, because they're 5-year rolling average, we've already had history of crashes. So it's, even if we would say our next year target is 0, which could be our best possible outcome, we would still have a target. It might not be rising, but we would, or it's possible it could be based on the previous year's numbers, but we would still basically have a target that wasn't 0. We have this conversation also because the only tool that the MPO has really to yield the conversation around for a specific jurisdiction's projects and their impact on safety. And part of the reason why I think TAC members have asked us to divide it up by roadway ownership as opposed to just geographical area is the attempt to try to start targeting and I'll call Chad out on this one, and he can add to this conversation if he wants, which is there were many crashes happening in the geographical area of Douglas County. However, they're on KDOT-owned roads. And so each individual owner of those roads is really the actor that has the most ability in this conversation as we bring this information and data to light and look at it on a regional level to tune the conversation in. That this is really, we hope, the first part of the conversation, that all of you as project sponsors and or representative of cities take this information back to your jurisdictions or look at your crash information as a way to, when you're doing a roadway project, you're looking, is there geographic or is there geometric improvements that can be done? Is there other stuff that can be done? I think the other reality is there's a lot of other extenuating circumstances and factors that transportation planning has nothing to do with that impact crashes. Number of vehicle miles traveled. Enforcement action impacts people's ability, and much of that is outside of the conversation that I think that we right now are having at this level. The hope is that this data and information really sets the tone and can serve for elected officials as a tool to begin to have that conversation. And I would welcome other ideas that you might have about how you want to continue to elevate those conversations across the jurisdictions if you think that's valuable. I'm not sure that just zeroing out as a visionary goal is the realistic way to kind of work towards improved safety across our transportation system. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's some of the discussion we've had before and some of the rationale of why we've ended up where we've ended up, which is in this precedent of looking at our projection and making a realistic projection about where we think we're going to be based on the expenditures that we see being projected and being made.
This is Adam Michael. That does help. I guess just as one additional piece, just to kind of make my understanding more well-rounded, what are the implications for not meeting the targets? Is it just that we recognize, it's a number that jumps out at us and that, like you said, kind of provides that space for the conversation to continue? Or is it tied to funding or anything else?
So Jessica Morton, your Transportation Planning Manager. So these are federally required performance measures. This was a federal attempt to standardize the process for what measures are taken, particularly all 5 of these safety targets are required by every MPO to set regionally every year. And I believe, at this point in time, there's nothing punitive. If you're not meeting your target, it's not punitive. We do believe there's some additional leverage. So in part of the conversation we've also had, because one of the other options our MPO has is to not set our own local targets. We could choose not to set county-specific MPO targets. We could choose just to adopt the state targets. We felt in doing that we were handing over power to the state then to defend, working on maybe prioritizing some of our own safety issues over state safety issues in terms of just prioritizing projects in regard to safety. But at this time, the feds have not indicated there's anything punitive related to not meeting your targets. I think it's always been speculated as part of the federal conversation that some punitive measures could come forward in the future, like if you're not meeting your targets, you lose your ability to spend this set of money on anything but safety improvements. I think that's kind of been the direction I think nationally people see it going. It hasn't gotten there, and I think that'll be a continuing conversation that we track and follow as we watch what's happening.
Great, thank you.
Great question, Adam. It was all last year's. Good stuff. This is quiz, Chair of TAC. Are there any other questions or comments for Jessica and or Ashley? All righty then, looking for a motion to approve the 2021 safety targets document.
This is Chad Voigt, County Engineer. I'll move that we approve the document.
This is Adam Michael, I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Chad and seconded by Adam to approve the 2021 safety targets document. Turn it over to Ashley for a roll call.
Thank you. Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner. Quiz.
Aye.
Adam.
Aye.
Allison had to leave, so I'm going to skip her. Jeffrey.
Aye.
Chad.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
And Melinda.
Aye.
Right. Passes 7-0.
Okay, we're going to move to letter E in the agenda. Quick updates. We have two updates. Item number 1 is Lawrence Loop Count Report 2017 versus 2020. Who gets this?
I can take it, I guess. Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. We talked about all the other issues. We wanted to share with you some data we've collected. Anecdotally, I think due to COVID, we heard in Lawrence of a lot of people professing the astronomical number of users that they saw out on trail and sidewalk infrastructure. We partnered with Friends of Lawrence Area Trails, who went out and conducted counts this spring. And overall, when we looked at the projections, we didn't see an increase overall in some of the projections. However, in some of the spots we saw increases, particularly look at the weekday trips. So what we've really determined is that our count methodology is really based on a regular day and not a COVID day. And it's led us to realize we need to collect some more data. And so we've put out some of our the video counters that the city has acquired in partnership with the public health to collect some more data that we can do some 15-minute increment counts based on video to understand where our peaks are, to understand where we need to be counting, to understand how much of a change, and we'll get some 12-hour counts that will allow us to better project what's actually happening. There was a little bit of variability too in the temperature by the time we collected. That Saturday we collected in 2020 was very hot, but I also think more people were biking and walking during the week at different times of day, and that we kind of saw. So this was just a really kind of fascinating exercise for us to kind of anecdotally look at the increase in trips we saw during the weekday during COVID, and look at the decrease we kind of saw on Saturday during COVID. I think it's fascinating. I think there's going to need to continue to be conversations about the impact on multimodal infrastructure, particularly about the potential latent demand that is there on our bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. And so we're going to continue to watch this. We actually ended up getting a demo of some software that takes cell phone data and does trips, and it was very fascinating to see how basically the distribution of trips had happened in spikes like inside grocery stores or other retail establishments. And so just from that's where people are walking when they were walking in terms of trips versus trips on campus, and that sort of thing was very fascinating. So this information is available and out there. We're going to continue to, we've collected some other video data. It's a matter of watching, working with our MSO interns to watch some of that data and get projections made, and we'll update this again. It's just fascinating data that we're going to continue to track and watch as we would our regular bicycle and pedestrian counts.
Okay, this is quiz, Chair of TAC. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Jessica or Ashley on this document? Jessica, I have one actually.
Okay.
So what was the time frame again in 2020? Was it the whole year?
No, so those are just one-time counts. We were looking, that happened, it was during lockdown. Ashley's gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong. Time has all flowed together. But we did.
That was gonna be my question is like,
yes.
Was it happening during the COVID lockdown that maybe there were more folks out walking and that kind of thing?
Part of it was, I believe, and that's what I think is people were taking breaks during their day from their home offices. Or near that, because I think some things we looked at, we looked in June, so it was just after that. But but I still think people's behaviors were changed, right? Like there was a lot more work from home that impacted that in terms of access to the trail infrastructure. Remember, this isn't necessarily in neighborhoods. This is some trail, some of these trail segments are in neighborhoods, shared use path, but many of them there's some more remote ones where you would really have to have a longer trip to bike or walk to them. So yeah, it's very fascinating. The data we saw on the demo we got of the project was very much during lockdown, and it really did disperse all of the trips that you saw like on campus or on a bunch of popular infrastructure into neighborhoods. And we speculate that's one thing that's also happening is people are choosing not necessarily to go walk on some of these more popular pieces of infrastructure, instead opting to use local routes in their neighborhood, so they're not having to cross over other people, right, to socially distance on their routes. And so that's kind of something that we saw in this other data set that we looked at. But it's all, I mean, some of it's on some level kind of all speculative, and we'll just continue to kind of get glimpses of it and hear a lot more anecdotal stories, I think, from people about what they're experiencing.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jessica on this? All right, we'll go to item number 2 under quick updates, and that's KDOT update.
So Allison, Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. Allison had to leave, but this is the monthly update that I think this is the first time, I think you've been sent this before as members because we got it for MPO Policy Board last month, but this is the staff updates that KDOT is now beginning to prepare in a text format and present and share with us. So we didn't get this in time to include it on your agenda in the future. Our goal is to include them on the agenda, so if people have questions about any of these things, they could ask in advance to make sure Allison can provide answers or follow-up contacts for any of these conversations. But we can skim through it, but this is really for your information, and there should be KDOT contacts if you have further questions about any of the items that they've given information about in this update. But expect to start seeing this monthly on your agenda.
All right, this is quiz, Chair of TAC. Thank you, Jessica. Any questions on that document that Jessica just shared with us? All right, we're going to move to letter number F on the agenda, other business. It is the FFY 21 Transportation Improvement Tip newspaper notice.
Yes, this is Ashley Myers, Transportation Planner. It came to our attention that the public notice that we tried to put in the Lawrence Journal World for the 30-day public comment period was not printed. We went through the whole process and we got the proof and we approved it. And then in their error, they did not print it. So we discovered that when we were working on a billing packet, when I realized we didn't have the affidavit. And so we just wanted to let you all know, we did go through our public comment process that's laid out in our public participation plan. So one, we put it in the newspaper, but then we also send it through our listserv that goes to over 1,100 people, and we post it on our website, and we have it at the 5 different locations so people could look at it in paper if they wanted to. We realized that not very many people probably actually see it in the newspaper, but wanted to be transparent and let you know that this error happened, and we will in the future make sure we get the affidavit before we go forward with bringing a document to you all or MPO policy board for approval.
This is Quiz, Chair of TAC. Does anybody have any questions or comments on Ashley's explanation of that? In general, Ashley, I mean, this doesn't like slow the process down or anything, or could it in the future on anything if it wasn't printed in the newspaper?
It's not a federal requirement for our work. It's just something that we do from our public participation plan. So it should be fine. We let KDOT and FHWA and FTA know, and they did not respond. So we take that as a good thing. Hopefully it's fine.
Gotcha.
Hey, Quiz, I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Ed Corton, Community Development Director. State of Kansas last year changed how they're doing public notices, and I believe every city could adopt in and have it on their website rather than going through a local newspaper. We recently changed ours, that our primary public notice is through the website rather than the Lawrence Journal World. I believe that's the case. I don't know if that's the case for Lawrence, but if that's the case, then they hit the primary way of addressing the public anyway, and they probably do additional through the newspaper, but I didn't know if that was their policy for Lawrence or not.
Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. It's something we could explore. We haven't. It's specifically listed as an action for a paid public notice in our public participation plan, and so it's our intent to follow that process. This was kind of an error from that, and so we wanted to draw your attention to it. It's I think it's in the realm of possibility in the future. It's something we could explore doing or not doing. I'm not sure because it's rare that in many of these document processes we get a lot of public engagement. Most of them that we do get are from individuals after they get asked to be added to our email list, or that we know are specifically on our email list. And so we would say that's probably just a more likely way that people are going to engage. It's a pretty big barrier to see it in a print publication in a newspaper and have to go seek it out to review it and comment on it. So I'm not sure. You know, oftentimes in many of these processes, we've had public processes before that public notice ever gets printed for a final draft. And so the likelihood we're really catching people at the very end is probably low. But I think that could be a conversation we have.
This is Quiz, Chair of TAC. So just to follow up, Ed, with you, did your public notice on your website cost you anything to put on? I'm assuming it was free.
Correct.
Yeah.
All you'd have to do is go through an ordinance process to say that this is our primary way of doing public engagement per the state statute. So,
cool. Great point. All right. Any other items? Any other discussion on letter F? All right, seeing none, we're going to go to letter G of the agenda. That means we're coming to the end. Our next meeting is scheduled for December 1st, and I'm going to assume the way that's written that is a tentative date, that could change possibly, but right now just kind of mark your calendars for December 1st, and Jessica and or Ashley will let us know if there are any changes with that.
Jessica Mortinger, Transportation Planning Manager. We anticipate meeting in December where we anticipate having the formation of a few committees to guide some of the work for next year. And we want to make sure we can start that off early in January to get those appointments. So we will want to have a quick meeting in December.
All righty then. Do we need to vote to adjourn the meeting? That's awesome. All right, everybody, we're done. Have a great day. Hope this warm weather comes back a little bit here over the next week or so. See you, everybody.